Mike Ritchie is the next question. What use does a phone number and email give you if you are investigating someone? You most likely don't want them to know if you contact them. Then what would you say if you contact them? Won't they be suspicious? I'm not sure what use that information would be. And that's some great questions there. That's good. Thank you so much, BB. I'm glad it's better now. Yeah, I think I actually had two microphones turned on there. Sorry about that. So should I go back to the other questions? Let me know that. If you want me to go back to the first two questions, I can definitely do that. So Mike Ritchie, that's some great questions. What he was referring to was a video that I made about some free databases out there that private investigators can use to get information. And a lot of the information that you'll get from things like that, you might get an address, but you'll also get phone numbers. You'll also get email addresses. And a lot of that information is good if you're trying to verify that you have the right person. So if you can find Bob Smith at this address with this phone number, and then you find Bob Smith used to live at this other address and had this phone number, the same phone number, that will help too. A lot of times getting that information, you just know that it's the right person that you're doing. A lot of cases, I need to have a phone number just to be able to verify that. If I go to one of the paid databases, I may be looking for a very common name like John Smith. I can put in John Smith and an area code, or John Smith and a zip code, or something like that to get it narrowed down to the actual individual. Sometimes I might be working for an attorney who is trying to find somebody. Let's say they're a witness and the attorney wants to talk to them. Then I would be providing the attorney that information so they can make contact with them in that situation. I do not just work for Joe Q Public out there and look up this information and give it to them. I would give it to an attorney that I'm working for, but I'm not going to just find somebody's privileged confidential information like phone numbers and emails and addresses and give that to a client out there on that. So hopefully that helps with that. And on occasion, I have in the past, if I'm doing surveillance on somebody and they are not represented, because if they're represented, I can't have any kind of contact with them, and I'm just not 100% sure I have the person, and I think I can do it without making them be suspicious, I might call them with a *67 to identify that it's my person that I'm watching. For instance, I recall one time a very large brownstone apartment complex where I was watching for somebody. I had no vehicle. I had 3 potential addresses in this large complex. He could live in this building, or that building. He'd been moving around to different apartments. I had about a 12, 13-year-old picture of the individual, a vague description of him. I needed to know if it was my guy or not. I saw a guy that fit that description, looked kind of like the person, but I wasn't 100% sure. Walking across the parking lot, I was able to grab my phone, do *67, which will block my phone information, and then his number and call it, and I saw him answer his phone at the same time. So I knew it was him. Now, I've only done that once or twice my entire time, because if they are represented, then you cannot have contact with them in any way, shape, or form. And if you're working for an attorney, you want to be careful of making contact with them as well. So hopefully that explains a little bit about that, Mike. Let's go on to Samuel's question here. Samuel says, I just started being a PI in February. Congrats, Sam. I'm glad you jumped on the bandwagon of private investigations. So far, the biggest issue I've had is mobile surveillance. I've been burned twice because of how I followed, but that's not the main issue. It's the fact that I consistently lose the individual when following because I don't want to get burned. And none of us really ever want to get burned. What is an optimal distance or tactic for following without being seen and without losing sight? Samuel, let me give you a couple of pieces of thought here. When I first got started back many years ago as a private investigator, I got burned a lot. I mean, I got burned all the time, and it was kind of a learning curve for me. I had to learn those same things: how far to stay back, when to take off, and things like that when I was watching somebody. I lost people a lot too. I would say at my pinnacle doing surveillance, and I was working probably 8 days a week, at least that's what it felt like. I was working every single day, sometimes day and night, working multiple different cases out there. So what I would do is I got to where I would be willing to lose the person and save the case for later rather than getting burned. And I would say probably I got burned 3 to 4% of the time. And my company still does a lot of surveillance, but I don't do all the surveillance myself. I contract a lot of that out. I do some of it now, but I contract most of that stuff out. But I didn't get burned as much, but I lost people probably 20 to 30% of the time. And again, when you're doing a lot of surveillance work, a lot of times it's saving that for the next time you're able to work them. The biggest thing with a lot of insurance companies when you're doing that surveillance is getting some level of video. So if you're at the house and you just got video of them walking out the front door, getting in the car and driving off, that's good stuff. That shows that they're active. It shows you have the right subject, the right address, and you're able to conduct surveillance there. So you're probably going to be able to get that work later. If you lose them in the follow, you can always, after you do a little area search for them, after you lose them, go back to the residence and wait for them again and get some more video. I've had a lot of cases where that was the situation just because of following them. You got to make that decision, do I get burned or not get burned? Insurance companies don't worry as much about you getting burned as you probably worry about it. Or if you're working a family matter, a domestic case, something like that, then you definitely don't want to get burned on something like that. In fact, I don't even take on most domestic surveillance cases anymore unless we can have 2 surveillance investigators out there just to make sure that we can, somewhat guarantee. We can't really guarantee, but we can ensure some integrity to that investigation. But as far as following them, here's some key rules. Obviously, you want to find that sweet spot in distance behind them. What I will often do if I got 2 lanes or 3 lanes and they're in the right-hand lane, I'm going to stay in the middle lane, or the left lane. I'm going to stay behind them kind of in their blind spot. Now you have to play this by ear. You want to make sure you're watching ahead. If there's a stoplight coming up, and you've got a big gap, you want to be able to close that gap in case they get through that light. You don't want to get stopped and they've taken off and now you've lost them. Even if they get stopped at the next light, it's very difficult for you to catch them without, racing through traffic, and that's very dangerous doing all of that. So that's one tactic. Sometimes I have to stay right behind them. Here's one of the biggest rules. If you're right behind them, it's not always bad to follow them. Now, if you're following them Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, every day, and you're right behind them, they're probably going to take notice of you. But the big thing you do not want to do when you're following a car is this. You do not want to be constantly looking in their side mirror. Because when they look in their side mirror and they see you looking in their side mirror, they're going to know you're looking at them. And they're going to wonder, why is this guy watching me all the time? Why is he staring at me? And you may be looking to see, are they getting suspicious? You may be looking to see, if you can get some kind of a tell, if they're going to go left or go right or something like that. But you don't want to be doing that. And that's a big thing that a lot of investigators, and I know a lot of veteran investigators that still are constantly looking in the mirror. Here's my biggest solution to that, is I just wear sunglasses. Now, you can't wear them at night, obviously, but at night you're not going to be seen looking in their side mirror as much either. But you don't want to always be looking in that mirror. You want to, again, have that distance. You want to be watching ahead. As you get further out, if let's say there's a light that's a mile away, you can spread that distance out a little bit, maybe not a half a block, but 3 or 4 car lengths back. And then as you're approaching a stoplight, you want to start accelerating, not real fast, but you want to start accelerating. So if they get through that light, you can follow them. If they turn right, you of course want to be able to turn right. If I follow them on a turn, I'll usually immediately get over into another lane, if that's possible. If it's a single lane, then that's not always possible. Sometimes I'll back off enough to let another car on a side street come in and get between us. That can get a little iffy, if that other car is going a lot slower or your guy is going a lot faster, you're not going to be able to keep up. But if you're in a multiple lane and they're in the left lane, you can do the exact same thing. You stay back in their blind spot a little bit. But if they're approaching a light, they may get that green arrow and they may take off suddenly and you have to get over. A big thing you have to remember, though, is watching ahead, so you can, if they do suddenly turn, you can go past, make a U, and come back and make that. If they go to the right, you can take it right into a residential maybe, and then come back around and hopefully catch up to them, but not always. If you do lose them, again, do an area search for 15 or 20 minutes, see if you can find their car somewhere. If you can't, go back to the residence and wait for them. If you wait for them there for about an hour, hour and a half, then it's probably time to contact the client, let them know, or just pull off and save those hours for another day. Again, for me, the best thing is to, I would rather lose somebody than to get burned, because then I can save it for another day. If it's a domestic situation, it gets a little more dicey there, especially, like if it's a cheating spouse or something. You may have that one opportunity. They're going out tonight. You don't have every other day. A big key to doing surveillance for insurance companies you want to remember is repeat business. When you get that case, if you can get some video of them when they're at their house, get a little bit of video when they're out and things like that, and you don't get burned, that case is probably going to come back to you. I had cases, we've had cases that we have worked 10, 12, 14 times. We might get the case 2 or 3 times a year, just the insurance company checking up to see what activities they're up to and things like that. They're not always thinking there's definitive fraud, but they just want to check things up. And when I was doing a lot of workers' comp surveillance myself, I got to where I'd say 70% or more of my business was what I called repeat business. It was cases that I'd worked prior that I got again. So trying to keep safe with that is a good idea there. Our next question is from Ryan Hayter. Ryan says, John, can you do a video about how to find work as a PI apprentice in my state? I need 4,000 hours, 2,000 hours can't be counted towards your education. And a lot of states with licensing do require some level of experience. In Colorado, we don't have licensing anymore, but when we did have licensing, before our governor decided to get rid of it, when we did have licensing, we had 2 levels of licenses. That was a level 1 license that required no experience, and then a level 2 that required 4,000 hours of experience. And 4,000 hours, just for your reference, equals 40 hours a week, full-time for 2 years. So it's quite a bit of experience in there. Some education, some states allow a certain amount of education. It sounds like for you, Ryan, that your state will allow up to 2,000 hours of that be education. So you would have to have an hour of other experience. As far as how do you find the work as a PI apprentice in your state, my biggest piece of advice for you, Ryan, would be get on Google and search for Private Investigator Association in whatever state you are in. Here in Colorado, our state association is the PPIAC, Professional Private Investigators Association of Colorado. I'm a senior member for that. I'm also the president for the PPIAC here in Colorado at the time. And you want to get with them and see when they have meetings and go to those meetings, maybe even join the association and get to networking and seeing who might be able to hire you in whatever capacity. You also want to check your licensing and see what experience counts. What type of PI experience counts, because in a lot of states, process serving will count for that. So you might get with a process server or get with a PI that's doing a lot of process serving and go out and do a lot of process serves for them. Maybe you're going to have to work at a very low rate to get that experience, but you're going to get that. But you're going to really have to get out there and network a lot. I would brush up your resume, make a new resume. I always suggest if you're looking for any kind of work, any kind of a job, you have a resume for each job that you're trying to get. So you make a resume that is geared towards being a professional licensed investigator. And you send that out to every private investigator association, not the associations, but every private investigator firm or PI out there, and just say if there's anything that you need help with. You might consider doing some free work for people, it's going to depend on the type of work or what you can do and can't do, but you might consider doing some of that. Office work may be able to be applied there if you're able to do some searches for them, some skip traces, different things like that. But really the big thing, Ryan, is going to be getting out there and networking with everybody. So let's move on to Oscar LeBron. Oscar asked about the K68. I did a little video on the K68 RF radio frequency detector. He says, is this device great for sweeping a car? And in that video, I don't have the K68 with me right now, but what I did in that video was I had one of these little GPS trackers, a magnetic GPS tracker, and I used it to show what it would do. And I was actually talking about a lot of different devices where you could try to find like GPS trackers and things like that to sweep a car or do other types of bug sweeps. With the K68, it would, when this little boy would chirp, it would give a signal. So we knew that, and I call it chirp or whatever you want to call it, but it would detect there. And the K68 has a magnetic probe you can hook up to it, and when it would get close, I would say within 4 to 6 inches, maybe 3 to 4 inches, then it would detect the magnet that's on the back of this, which was nice too. So you could stick it around and you can see if it lit up and if it told you that there was a magnet on there. And these magnets, they're quite strong. I actually have 2 of them, so you can see they are quite strong magnets on there. So those magnet detectors are really nice. Now, is the K68 great for sweeping a car? No, it's not great. I wouldn't even say it's good. It's okay in some instances, but the most common type of tracker device we're going to find is something similar to this. This is a tile, and you can get those Apple AirTags. You can get ones that are even smaller than this, and they don't have any magnet on them. People will take these and they put a little bit of that double-sided tape on them, and you can stick them anywhere. That magnet detector isn't going to detect it at all. And these have a little chirp to them too, but it's not near as powerful. You have to be a lot closer to it, and it's not for as long. So something like that, and most RF detectors, even professional RF detectors, aren't necessarily going to catch that. So what you're going to find when you're sweeping a car is that a physical inspection with eyes, hands, inspection cameras, looking in every nook and cranny, that is going to be what's going to help you find devices like this or devices like this a whole lot easier than any kind of a device. A lot of people think there's something, even if I take my Andre, my advanced near field detection receiver, and if I use it to sweep a car, then I'm going to be able to find any bug on a car, and you're not. You know, we even have a nonlinear junction detector, and you can't use that on a vehicle. A non-lin will identify any electronic item, whether it's on or off, running or not running, transmitting or not transmitting, but there's a lot of limitations with it. And all the metal in a car and all the other electronics in a car would interfere with a non-lin, not to mention the physical size of a non-lin. So really, with a vehicle, the best thing that you can do is eyes and hands and inspection cameras, and you're looking in and under and over and through everything out there. So that is all the questions that I have in my mailbox for today. I don't see any in the chat. So I'll be back on next week on Saturday at the same time, 9 o'clock. And if you have questions, of course, you can put them in any of our videos, and I will pick those up, or you can put them in the chat. Of course, the chat's going to go away here in just a little bit. But I will see you guys later.